Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I very much welcome hearing that Philip Sim is watching the debate. I know how much he enjoys my contributions. And let me just say to Bruce Crawford that in 1945, the ration for cheese was 2 ounces a week. So there'll be very little prospect of having macaroni cheese very, very often. And indeed, research that was done in 1939, at the very beginning of the war, showed that one could live and thrive on 1 pound of meat a week, 1/4 pint of milk a day, 4 ounces of margarine, and as much potatoes, vegetables and bread as you could eat. And that was all you needed to survive on. Although the experiment did report that there was a substantial increase in flatulence. Speaking of which, David Stewart.
David Stewart.
Thank you for the member for allowing the intervention. What was the member's experience of living through the Boer War?
Stewart Stevenson.
I'm never bored by any debate on the subject of food, because food realistically has become a hobby for many of us, rather than a way of living our lives. I, of course, am a little bit older than, apart from one person in the chamber at the moment, and I do remember I do remember the ending of sugar rationing in February 1953, when I was 6 years old. And the ration for sweeties at that point was actually 11 grams a day. And just to translate that into something meaningful, that means, in today's terms, you could have a Mars bar every 5 days. Total, nothing more, that was it. And we were actually a great deal healthier when our food intake was controlled by the state. I don't advocate a return to that, but it illustrates how much of our food intake is optional, is voluntary and unnecessary. Oh, the equivalent of that, by the way, I should say, is that 1 can of Coke every 3 days has got the sugar content of the 1953 ration. So therefore, I and others of my generation probably have less of a sweet tooth. And hopefully that's reflected. I'm about 1 kilo over the weight I should be. I'm working on it. But my heart beats okay, my respiration rate's okay, and I've just had my blood pressure tested here in the Parliament last week, and I'm in the acceptable limits. I'm below 140, and the difference between systolic and diastolic is about 60. But that's not true of everybody in our society, and people suffer because of that. Now, exercise too. We don't all have to be a Brian Whittle, who is a world-class athlete. I'm nowhere and never have been near his historic achievements. But at least I and all of us here can be walking in our normal day. My watch is telling me that I've walked 2.5 miles today. Looking at my diary, I'm expecting about 4.5 miles tomorrow. I'm in the 20 to 30 miles a week. Just simply walking, doing my normal business, avoiding taking taxis. And I think that is a great help to my personal physical and mental well-being, because walking is a great activity to undertake, to think about things and think through issues that we may have. Now, diabetes is one of the major consequences of our being overweight. And if we go again back to the period after the war, diabetes, type 2 in particular, barely existed. Type 1 was quite uncommon. But we need to be cautious because the diagnostic tools were pretty poor. So I suspect there was a huge amount of undiagnosed diabetes at that time. Basically, it was diagnosed by smelling acetone on the patient's breath, according to my father. But by that time, you were quite severely diabetic, and your life was really in quite severe risk. Sport, too, in schools is not what it used to be. I went to a very large school. On our peak day, 490 pupils would be participating on a Saturday in competitive sport. Rugby, football, hockey and cross-country teams. A grand total of 490 pupils. That's not the case today. So I think a restoration of sport in our schools is definitely going to help. I very much welcome this debate. I very much welcome the focus there is on being healthy, taking exercise, and on good food. Presiding Officer.